As the 2025 Indiana General Assembly enters its final phase, two legislative reveals this week held most of the headlines. In the House, members advanced a property tax relief package through an amended version of Senate Bill 1. In the Senate, the Appropriations Committee brought forth its plan for a new state budget. Other highlights include the passage of bills enhancing oversight of Indiana's waters. Also, legislation involved with paring down the state's individual income tax as conditions are met, that beginning in 2030. And also analyzing any cost savings if Indiana were to require all counties move from traditional precinct-based voting to a vote center model. Well, our guests offer their perspective from their respective legislative chambers on all this and more next on this week's Primetime. And good evening, I'm Bruce Haines. With us this week, our 13th District Republican State Senator and Assistant President Pro Tem Sue Glick, and 80th District Democratic State Representative and House Democratic Leader Phil GiaQuinta. And we invite you to join our conversation. Just call in your questions or comments by using the number that you see on the screen. And as we're widened out here, Senator Glick, Representative GiaQuinta, Sue, Phil, thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks,
you, Bruce. Always good to be here.
So it's been reported that Senate Bill 1 on property tax reform was 46 pages when it was first introduced by Governor Mike Braun. It grew in the Senate to 91 pages, and when the House unveiled its measure this week, it was more than 350 pages. What I'm wondering is, what do each of you see as you work your way through the pages of the bill? Sue, I'll start with you.
Well, it's changed substantially, obviously.
Grown, apparently.
Grown, exponentially or whatever. You see a lot of minutia that's in there that's been added, and that's because I liken it to tinkering with an engine, to those mechanics out there. You start moving over here and you change things, and then you start shifting back and forth. But the real problem is that when you move too far in any direction, the original idea was to do away with property taxes. But then you have to look at the schools, you have to look at the municipalities, towns, cities. All of those rely on property taxes to survive. And if you cut that off, there's no replacement, or you have to figure out how to replace it. And many of the mayors immediately let us know that counties and county government, council and commissioners made us aware of the fact they can't make it up with local income tax. And that's not really fair to, all you're doing is shifting, we're taking money out of this pocket, now we're taking it out of here, but the taxpayer isn't going to realize any savings if you do it that way. You really have to be scientific in how you do it and adjust it so no one gets hit too hard.
Mm-hmm. Phil, your sense of it so far?
You stole my line, by the way. Yeah, so what happened was that in the Ways and Means Committee in the House, there were two bills, Senate Bill 1 and then Senate Bill 518. That's the reason that the number of pages when we talk about how this has grown, particularly so when you add language, you add another bill to Senate Bill 1, which was taking Senate Bill 518 and adding it to 1. So essentially, I'll talk about 518 in a second. It's kind of I want to take up the whole show talking about this issue by itself, but Senate Bill 1 is trying to, look for ways to reduce property taxes, and part of the problem is the reliance on property taxes having to do with the personal property tax, business property tax. So that was. I think in the original Senate Bill 1 might have been all eliminated altogether, 100%. Which was going to be a big hit to local governments. So they scaled that back, so that the hit won't be as difficult. But in the end, what you really have is you're trying to lower property taxes you're right, Senator Glick's right. There has to be ways to sort of for local governments to make that up. And so it kind of really, in a way, at the end, it just becomes sort of a philosophy on what you think. Do we want to be solely reliant on property taxes? Not solely, but reliant on property taxes, local option income taxes, sales taxes, all kinds of things. And so when we talk about, lowering one thing, and so I remember one time, to steal one of your lines, about kind of waving the pom-poms, because we can easily say, hey, we cut your taxes, but on the other hand, then local governments are left to sort of pick up the pieces, and they're going to have to raise taxes if they want to keep the services and things that I think most citizens have come to expect. And then in that same vein, on that, within the kind of the Senate Bill 1 language, the hit to not only local government, but part of that, of course, schools. And just looking at the numbers again between today and yesterday, over the course, what I saw, the fiscal note said over the course of 3 years, 26, 27, 28, it's going to be total of around $12 to $13 million hit for Fort Wayne Community Schools. I looked at my own district, and around $6 million for East Allen's community schools. So, so you're kind of weighing that, and really, they're left without the mechanisms to find more revenue like local governments can do. Now, Senate Bill 518, which was amended into Senate Bill 1, basically that has to do with that kind of that revenue sharing piece. So they thought, there's a lot of charter schools. We don't really have a lot of charter schools in Northeast Indiana. There's 2 in Allen County. But basically, when a school system wants to put up a referendum, that if it's passed, they have to share some of that they have to share a piece of that piece of the referendum, the money that they would receive from that increase would have to be shared with the charter schools. That's something that probably I believe ran into some trouble on its own, so which is why they probably, frankly, as a strategy to put it into Senate Bill 1. So that's something I think that, in my opinion, it just feels like they're going to ask for more. They're going to increase their ask in a referendum because they know they're going to have to share that money with potentially other charter schools, and by the way, who pays for that? That goes back on the property tax roll. So I feel like we're back to where we started. Right. So that's kind of it in a nutshell, and I didn't mean to monopolize all the time.
I'm glad you did. The sad part about it is when people look at their tax statement, they see everything above the line, and they say, well, my taxes went up, but you have to look down there at the bottom, where it says there's a school referendum, there's special assessments, or they go to these particular taxing districts which are outside the levies, if you will. And I think the desire in Indianapolis at the General Assembly is trying to get off that levy, the idea of the levy, and talk about rates, so people can understand their taxes. When you get your taxes, you don't know why you're paying so much. The hope in the Senate Bill 1, as it stands right now, is that 67% of the people in Indiana are going to see their property taxes go down. Now, it's not going to all go away. Don't get that in your head, but it is going to go down. There's going to be significant savings, but that still leaves a third of the people whose taxes are not going to go down, and they're not going to be happy, and they're seeing someone else enjoy that. However, you have to remember, they're in an area, or they're in a taxing unit, if you will, where there's additional expenses, or their property has increased in value substantially. And as we do it right now, as the taxes are figured, they would realize more gain if they sold. But for many people, especially the elderly or someone who does not want to sell, they're not in the market to sell, they're very upset because they're paying taxes on a house they bought for a low amount or lower amount, and now they're being taxed at a substantially inflated value. And it's kind of a perfect storm as we're sitting around in a time when housing there are shortages in housing, and homes are significantly increasing as young families move into the housing market. They want 2-3 bedrooms or more. they're driving the forces to kind of increase the value of some of those older homes, and it's very difficult for many people. That's why we build into the deductions for senior citizens and veterans and some of those. So.
Oh, I'm glad you're mentioning that, because we have Chris calling with an offline question. First, thanking you both for talking about property taxes, and then saying, what are your thoughts on not requiring senior citizens to pay property tax once they are on a fixed income? Phil?
Well, and you might want to talk about that, just because it was in I believe it was in the original Senate Bill 1. So there is some good news for folks over the age of 65. And without getting I don't want to get too much into the specifics, but there is some protections there for those over 65. Now, we also know that there's some interesting language in there for veterans as well, and some other. You can't claim both. You can't do both, but certainly there's different ways for specific carve-outs needs, if you will, for not only veterans, for those over 65 as well.
And what we're talking is a credit which comes off
Right.
in a different location than your deduction. It actually comes off, and you're talking about $250 maximum credit, but it's a direct reduction in taxes, and it will go to the senior citizens. It will go to veterans. If they're veterans with a disability of at least 10%, and totally disabled veterans will have that. Right now, their maximum is something in the neighborhood of, it came out to, I believe, 249 was the maximum. It'll bump it up a little, but it also will be a standard deduction or standard credit that they can take. So there's some compensation, but the confusion is a lot of different categories, which we've done in the past, and many people missed out on those because they simply either didn't know they were there, or they weren't aware that they could claim them. And we want to simplify it in such a manner that they can understand their tax bill and reduce it for the majority of Hoosiers.
You probably want to move on, and I'm happy to do so, but I will say, kind of going into this, in fact, I just found out last week my property taxes actually went down $400 this year. So I have not received over the course of the year, look, we all nobody wants to pay taxes of any kind or for any increases, of course, but we need to, of course, for services that we receive, things like police, fire, and those sorts of things. But my biggest concern is that the max, what is it, $300, I think, be able to receive. I don't know if folks will even hit that amount. And then again, is that sort of offset by what locals will be able to do? Because there are things in the bill now that they will be able to increase, where you were talking about the rates, where they used to be able to go up to this much of a tax. It's been extended, so there will be some, I assume, down the road. Again, if cities and local governments want to maintain the services that they have now, they're going to have to increase their local option income taxes, so to make up for the loss in property tax revenue.
If it isn't a happy ending, how much closer are we to a workable ending with what we have before us that is working its way from the House soon back to the Senate? If the road to reform is from here to there, how close to there are we?
Well, I think we're much closer than we were. We're at second reading amendments, so anything coming through the Senate now has to be voted on Monday. Second reading in this is when you can still make amendments to a bill. You can offer amendments to a bill. It goes to third reading, final for thirds, meaning that bill is going to be voted up or down. Yes or no, we're taking it as it stands on that day. If it's not voted on Tuesday, it's dead for the session. But just because we pass it in the Senate doesn't mean it's automatically law, because what happens after that, if there's been any changes in the Senate, and same in the House, if there's been any changes in bills in the House, then they have what they call conference committee. And so 2 senators and 2 House members, 1 from each party, meet in conference committee, and they iron out the differences in those bills. And so there's still portions of the bills that may change in order to get a consensus of both houses, and then it will be, only then will it go to the governor, and he gets the final up or down on that bill.
Wow.
Our final day, like yours, for final passage of all bills is Tuesday, and bills that can be amended, of course, is Monday. So we don't have as many. The funny when the bills switch. What do we? I think we file. I don't know how many each side file. 1,800 in the House or something like that. Well, you only sent us 150, so we appreciate that. We wouldn't want all the ones that you filed to come our way. So, you're dealing with a much smaller number of bills, and so our calendar is a little bit less. You've got the budget on a second reading amendment, for the budget on Monday, and that'll be very interesting to watch too. So, as I said earlier, we were talking earlier, I like the Senate version of the budget better than the House version. We'll see what happens.
And we will tee up a conversation about the budget in just a moment. We want to bring Jeff's offline question here, and he says, thank you, Senator Glick, for your work in water conservation. Last week, you had a chance to speak about nuclear power. What are your thoughts on meeting our energy needs?
Well, for all of us, as our population grows in some areas and it changes over time in what our needs are, we've got to make sure people have the energy that they need. And we have to develop our transmission and our delivery system, accommodate all of the economic development that we're attempting here in Indiana, and there's a lot of growth. And so we can't do it on just conventional build out. It's not going to happen with just solar and water. It's just, that's not it, or wind. It's going to be a combination of many factors. And as we move away from traditional, like coal-fired generators, we're looking at a lot of different options. There are groups that are working on hydrogen and issues, having to deal with the generation and delivery of hydrogen and how that can be done effectively. Nuclear is a source of energy. Indiana, Michigan has come up with a plan. They wish to change a coal-fired plant down in, I think it's the Petersburg area, from coal-fired to a small modular reactor. It's larger than you would have like on a submarine or an aircraft carrier, but they've proved to be, in most cases, very safe, very effective, and deliver a good deal of power. But even though they're starting the process now, they have a ramp, they have a run-up to that, and it's going to take 7 to 10 years to get it online and generating electricity. So we need to augment that in some fashion or another to make sure we have good, clean, safe energy, but to serve our needs. And there's going to be a lot of talk in the coming years, not just this session, but going forward, about connecting all of our data centers, all of our new plants around the state of Indiana. I was in a meeting today. They were the Crane people, which is the Naval Surface Weapons Center in southern Indiana, southwest Indiana, and they're working on all kinds of expansion down there, their Westgate area and all of that, the technology center. All of it is depending on the delivery of more energy to them, as many of our businesses and our economic development is being driven around the state. And they're talking transmission lines covering Fort Wayne and Raython and your military defense technology, all the way over to the research park at Purdue, all the way down to Crane, including Indianapolis and some other areas that have substantial development. So it isn't just a local problem. It's just not a small town problem. It's a state of Indiana. As we grow, we have needs that have to be met, and that's part of the responsibility of the General Assembly to anticipate it and move in that direction. Nuclear power is an option. It may not be the answer for everyone, but it's certainly on the table.
Will bills like, I think it's House 1007, I think, on small modular reactors, will that move forward?
Oh, yeah. Well, and there's actually more than that. There's some Senate bills as well dealing with this issue. And certainly right. I mean, the companies are moving away from coal-fired energy and moving more toward clean energy, as we like to call it, wind, solar, nuclear. The issue, I think, when we build these facilities, and they've been a little slow to kind of to get off the ground, if you will, throughout the whole country, but what's the cost to the ratepayers? That's been kind of a contentious issue. You know, can the Googles of the world, Facebook, all those folks that are the ones that need the energy, you know, is there more that they can chip in, if you will, particularly in the startup of these where it can be so expensive to build these small reactors, if you will, and you know, and that's kind of the sticking point, I think, for me is, you know, and I think for all of us really is, you know, we want to make sure that the ratepayers aren't getting socked too badly when they start the construction of these.
Right.
But you're right. All bills are moving forward pretty fast, and something will happen.
And speaking of which, the other one that's sort of moving forward with in yellow highlighter is Job 1 for the General Assembly, the state's next 2-year spending plan. The Senate Appropriations Committee came out with its budget early in the week. Some are reporting that it is somewhat similar to the House, save for the Senate maintaining the eligibility requirements for the school voucher program, which the House has removed. Let me get your thoughts in general, or anything in particular regarding
the Senate removed it. So the House budget took the cap off, so there's no eligibility required for school vouchers.
Oh, excuse me, that's correct.
And then the Senate, the budget that came out of committee on Thursday, that'll be on second reading Monday, keeps it at the level of 2023, which is what we actually had an amendment to do just that. So, and then which frees up really about roughly, you know, you never know how many folks are going to use it, but they estimate about $180 million, which, you know, real dollars, and you certainly can use that for other. I mean, most of us would probably argue family for making $250,000, $300K over that probably can afford it. They've been, you know, affording it so far. And then there's just some other things, particularly with the funding for virtual charter schools, which was at 80%. The House took it up to 70. The House took it up to 100%. The Senate rolled it back to about 75%. So there's some things in there. And then I know when I looked at the school runs for Fort Wayne Community Schools for the Senate version, it's around about a 2% increase, which was better than the House version, which was just flatlined. So go Senate.
and we have someone in the Senate who can get it for us wholesale. What's your sense of what you're hearing on the budget side of things?
Well, we're feeling better about it in the last few days, and we see a budget daily, and there are, you know, options and amendments being offered along the way. So we get to the second reading deadline is tomorrow, so it's going to be over at that point, except for the conference committee, if you will, and then Wednesday being the third reading deadline.
And the forecast that comes out
and the
midweek,
forecast, I was going to say the financial forecast for the state of Indiana will come out on Wednesday, and that basically is going to be the bottom line. As they describe it to me, we start with what happens if the forecast is very, very low, and that's one set of numbers. What happens if the forecast is very, very high, and then the bill that they're actually working where they penciled in some numbers, and now they can, when they see that forecast, they will be able to say, okay, we have to go with the low numbers, and we have to trim some fat out if there's any left. And if it's a little bit better, maybe we can add a little back in. And there's always things that we'd like to do if we had the revenue to do it. There's some really good causes that maybe we have flatlined, we have not increased, because we simply didn't have the revenue forecasted to be able to do that. And Indiana is required by the Constitution to balance their budget. We don't spend like the feds spend because we are required to balance our budget. So we have a little play there, but we're not going to go wild with our spending either way, because we know, A, we don't have that money. It doesn't look like that budget forecast is going to be that way. And two, we really don't know what's happening in Washington. The federal government is saying we're doing away with the U.S. Department of Education. And what that means is many of those grants that come to our schools and are factored into their budgets and have been factored into our state budget for education may disappear. We simply don't know with what's happening in Washington where that is. And those are our kids, and we need to invest in one of our biggest resources and one of the most important resources. So that's always in the back of our mind. You know, what do we have to do? How do we backfill any shortfall?
Let me ask you this. We have about 25 seconds apiece, which is horrible to even ask a question. But nevertheless, what are you watching in these final couple of days that you're looking to see move through legislatively?
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is obviously the budget, the forecast. There's some other issues out there that have been percolating with regards to school board elections. Should they be partisan? So it'll be kind of interesting to see how that rolls out. So, but I know this is your last live show, but so before we end, I just wanted to congratulate you on, I don't know, 30 years for doing this. I think I've been on it about 1,000 times, and I've enjoyed it every minute, and it's been a lot of fun, Bruce. Congratulations.
Well, I appreciate it. We all are learning together and growing through these years right alongside, and your information that you share coming back from Indianapolis to this region is a huge help for us all. It flattens out our learning curve. So,
I know she shares my congratulations.
Yes, I do.
Well,
I want to join. That's one thing that bipartisan in our congratulations. We appreciate it, and this gives us an opportunity to talk to our supporters and our critics as well, is to try and bring them up to speed on what's going on in Indianapolis.
Well, thank you both so much, and we will go out on that note. And for all of us with Primetime, I'm Bruce Haines. Thank you for watching. Take care, and we will see you soon. Good night. The preceding program on PBS Fort Wayne was made possible in part by
The Rogers Company has been conducting business in Northeast Indiana since 1944 as Rogers Markets and now as The Rogers Company with commercial property and real estate development. Pleased to support local not-for-profits and PBS Fort Wayne. The Regional Chamber of Northeast Indiana advocates for world-class infrastructure, a competitive business climate, 21st century talent, and rural investment. One region, one voice. NEINadvocates.com. Purdue University Fort Wayne will host Marcus Collins, cultural scholar and professor, Thursday, February 27th at 7:30 as part of the Omnibus Speaker Series, inspiring fresh and diverse thoughts. Details at pfw.edu/omnibus.